Welcome to Coach Business. I'm your host and coach, Caryn Gillen. And today we have a coach joining us who is someone who I see as a very skilled person who's very rigorous with their work, which isn't always the case with coaches. I'd like to introduce you to Nicola Holmes. And Nicola, I'd love for you to tell us in your words, who do you help? What do you do?
Okay, thanks, Caryn. Yeah, so I'm Nicola Holmes, and I'm a change and transition coach. So I guide people during times of significant thresholds. I've done this work for about 17 years, and I find that at this stage, a lot of people in midlife, in their 40s and 50s, seem to gravitate to working with me as they step into significant decisions or sit at various crossroads in their lives and seek to turn important fantasies into goals and new realities. And yeah, this work has been my passion, yeah, for a long time. So that's
Yeah.
my little shorthand to start us
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. So you're a change expert.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's fun.
yeah.
Okay. So I know that we wanted to talk today about something that's really important. And I
hmm
think it's something that I've always been really interested in. And over
hmm
the course of my life, has just kind of had a different reaction or evolved. And that's just the idea of women in power. Like I've always
hmm
loved power. I've loved seeing how
hmm
power moves and seeing where power goes and watching who has the power in the room. And it's
hmm
just always been something that's been interesting to me and I've been aware of. And it's
hmm
something that I know that you like to work with women on. So I'm excited just to dive in
hmm
and hear how you think about it.
Yeah, me too. Do you want me to kick right off and say a
I
few
do.
things?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll just say two. I think this is probably something dear to my heart, like the idea also of gender and power and women and power. I think I've been fascinated by women's lives and centering women's lives even since I was a young child. Like I
Mhm.
loved female protagonists and studying women's history and declared myself a feminist, as an adolescent. So I just want to name on a kind of collective level, I'm really intrigued by how women access power, experience power, their perhaps complex relationships with power. So I guess I just want to add that collective lens. I think it's a pretty interesting theme of exploring women's relationship with power. I would say
Yeah.
that to start us off.
I love it. And how is this working with women
hmm
in midlife? I think it's
hmm
interesting. I have a tween, right? She's just entering her tween years and I'm like, "Oh, and I'm entering perimenopause." And I'm like, there
hmm
these two major transitions and we're doing them at the same time. Although apparently mine lasts
Yes.
longer, but it feels powerful.
Yes. And just to locate myself in that sort of age and season of life spectrum, I'm getting close to 50. And yeah, as I said, a lot of the women that I work with are in their 40s, 50s, some 60s, some maybe still 30s, but this 40s and 50s season of life strikes me as a really interesting time where I notice a lot of women wanting to claim or expand more of their own sense of personal power or creative power, agency in their own lives. And it's an interesting time where for a lot of my clients, there's a tension between stepping into greater self awareness. They know themselves, they have a lot of life experience and wisdom under their belt. There's often a sense of stepping more into their own worth, knowing their value at a deeper level. And yet, the tension I was going to point at is it's also an interesting stage where many of us hold significant amounts of responsibility, caregiving, professional, personal responsibilities in such a way that there's often a lot of constraint and challenges. So it's an interesting season, I find, about how women are grappling with power and wanting to expand, but also navigating particular contexts,
Hmm.
especially of caregiving and commitment and responsibility.
Yeah. A lot of limitations at the same time.
Yeah.
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 Are we frustrated? How are we handling all of this? What do you see?
I mean, I see a wide range. So, for sure, let me be honest and kind of candid. I absolutely see some women frustrated, and to make that more concrete, so that can be frustrated in conditions that they may feel they've outgrown or that are stagnant, whether that's a marriage or a workplace or a role within a career setting. So I think there can be frustration with feeling constricted or contracted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also know a lot of women speaking up to me saying, like, it's almost like a deeper frustration with conditions that feel, frankly, toxic or no longer life-giving, or there's like a deeper values misalignment. And I know a number of women who it's almost like, can I swear on your podcast?
Yeah.
Caryn? Okay. Like where they're sort of like, I'm done with the bullshit. Like I'm really
Mm-hmm.
getting tired of some conditions that don't feel aligned with who I am and what I want to be collaborating and contributing, like collaborating with or
Mm-hmm.
contributing to. And yet again, sometimes if there are instances where they hit up against some of those constraints, it's not as easy as, I'm 23, footloose and fancy free, and just jumping left, exploring right. So again, I
Mm-hmm.
do see women experiencing some frustration. And sometimes there's a discernment and clarity on how to move. And other times the frustration is there are not always easy options. Yeah, immediately available or perceived. What about
Right.
you? What about you in terms of frustration or longings that you see?
Yeah, I think it's just um noticing that there's just so much work for everyone to do.
Yeah, writ large.
The responsibility piece is big. It's like, okay, yeah, you might have the most economic freedom you've ever had, but you have the least amount of time you've ever had. So good luck taking advantage of your vacation days or using it in the way you want. Like, and we're really living out a lot of the choices that we made when we were 24, 27, 35. And like, wow, would
Yeah.
I have done that the same way? Maybe not, but here we are. So I think then there's all that
Hmm.
grief woven into it too.
Yes, I resonate with that.
Mm-hmm. So it's a really interesting time, reflective time.
I think so too. And interestingly, I think with aging, it also seems like I notice a little trend. I'm just thinking of this offhand, that sometimes there are milestones that seem to evoke or catalyze some of like a consideration of what's possible for me, or how can I move creatively in my own life or step more fully into my own power, because I'll see things like women hitting a milestone birthday, like wow, I'm almost 50, pardon me, or um I'm about to turn 60. There's something I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes about markers of these seasonal shifts or stage shifts that kind of give it like awaken us a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't know, give rise to some impulse to like develop ourselves or grow. I just noticed that, yeah, that can happen, that there's almost like, huh, what do I need to tweak, or is reinvention an option for me? And, I think in other cases it's an illness,
Mm-hmm.
menopause. But I think, again, there are different things that can maybe motivate change and conscious navigating of the transitions that are afoot in this season.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting too. Some people at this stage have kids leaving the home. Other people have kids finally going to school. Like
Yes.
we're doing all these life transitions at all these different phases on top of each other. I'm curious,
Yes.
what do you want to what do you want to add to this conversation that you haven't heard? Like, what have you been craving
Mm.
around this topic, just for yourself or for your clients?
Well, I guess I think there's something powerful simply about validating and naming like what we see as alive, perhaps in our own experiences or in our clients' experiences. I do find as a coach there's a privilege of accompanying people in a fairly intimate way that sometimes I feel a little bit like it gives me a sense of the zeitgeist, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll hear, phrases repeated or themes come alive. So I guess I think first and foremost, I hope that maybe someone who's listening will simply feel a little less alone or maybe validated just the conversation that, we're having and that we'll continue to have. And I'm trying to think, I guess what I wish is that maybe people might come away with some inspiration or encouragement for the questions that, they're sitting with, or the ways they relate to this theme in their own lives. So I don't have an exact answer, but,
Mm-hmm.
validation, inspiration, encouragement, like that's what I hope our conversation might spark
Mm-hmm.
um, for a listener. I don't know. Did you have a sense, or like, again, I didn't come bringing,
Mm-hmm.
bullet points that I want to hit, or,
Yeah.
anything so formed as that. I wonder if anything comes
No,
to you.
I think it's interesting. And I think you're right. It's just like having conversations about women in power is important so that women hear
Yeah.
conversations about women in power, having conversations about what is it like to be in the midlife space, sandwiched between caregiving and caregiving, and, having the least amount of time you've had potentially ever in your life. Like, I think it's just important to say these things out loud. I'm not sure that I have anything major to add other than it's just so important to hear your experience of life shared by other
Yes.
people. Like, I think that's
Yes.
one of the gifts of it.
I guess what I would add is just that I think it really matters. And I think each of our own willingness, whether it's tiny little steps and sometimes it's incremental, experiments or changes that we dare to run, and sometimes it's a bigger, terrifying, even actually, courage requiring step like choosing to leave a marriage or recommit and growing a relationship, like, or making a bigger career pivot. I mean, I guess I just want to honor that in a culture, a dominant culture. I mean, you're in the States, I'm in Canada. I think there's still the intersections of ageism and sexism, let me name those, that I guess I'd also love to name. I think it really matters that we dare to keep growing into our power, and to know that how we live our lives ripples, sometimes in ways we can see, and other times in ways we might not even know or perceive. And so I guess I just want to say, I think women's lives across the lifespan, but maybe especially like in midlife, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. I just want to say, I think it really matters that
Mm-hmm.
we claim our value and our power and be as conscious as we can about making good use of our lives. I
Mm-hmm.
guess I just want to declare that a little.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing that's striking me is like, are, are there a couple of dudes in their 40s and 50s sitting around on a podcast contemplating their power and the relevance of their lives? I don't know if they're actually doing that, or are they
Yeah.
just doing life with their power and going forward? And
Yeah.
how is that different?
That's an interesting thought. I mean, my God, in terms of the psychology and some of the gendered aspects of midlife, gosh, even the old, I think of it almost as a slightly old jargon of like midlife crises, um, and why and how that may differ for men or women. But what I will say is, I think there's lots of ways, that men get socialized to be valued for having power, claiming power in sort of traditional ways that may be formal leadership, political power, financial power. And so I think often women may be later in life to dare to claim ambition, to claim fullest aspects of their power. And I think there may be different journeys for men. And of course, intersections of race, class. We know there's not
Hmm.
homogenous gender identities. Nonetheless, I think sometimes for women, as we move through life, there's room to dare to take up more space, and that can feel almost like a boldness, and to have to grow our sense of safety to feel worthy and capable to claim more power. I think that may be there for women as an opportunity in a different way than for men.
Hmm. Yeah. And with everything else, like if we have more money, less time, we also have less patience to conform in different ways, which, yeah.
I see that in a big way. And I also want to honor, I mean, pardon me, I also definitely have women who come to work with me because sometimes there's a feeling almost of like, where is there still untapped potential in me or aspects of myself that haven't yet been developed? So I have women who feel like finances are actually like their Achilles heel and that they haven't come into their fullest financial power, or that there are women who their caregiving realities have shifted as they become single parents, or like you
Hmm.
say, the sandwich generation, and even the gendered expectations that I think are still alive of some disproportionate like balances of caregiving labor. So yeah, I think there are different reasons that women can feel um, challenged. And so it's almost hard to get time, energy, finances. Like I think probably very few of us have every single arena feeling robust. So it's tricky. Like how do we creatively navigate with our
Yeah.
particular challenges and currencies that feel well stocked? It's just interesting how we all have to juggle, I think, to some extent.
Hmm. But your clients are leaning into that. It's time to grow now.
Yeah, and some of them will say like there's almost the sense of it's time for me. It's and
Right.
whatever that looks like, it's time for me to finally prioritize my own health, or even things like that may seem frivolous, like no, it's time for me to actually have time for leisure, like I've
Hmm.
so often done the work of putting everyone else's needs first, or my kids have launched and now I'm an empty nester. Like time for me, energy for me, room for like some of my own like deeper longings. So I just think it's interesting when women come to me saying, I think coaching is about protecting like space for me, time for me, and like what I really yearn for, whatever. And again, that can look very different for each
Hmm.
woman, but I hear those kind of longings.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's what feels like grounded power to me is someone who's willing to do what they want.
yeah. Willing and also brave enough to look at where they may feel held back. And that could be both by external conditions, but probably as often as we both know, there's pieces around like, where does it feel risky or even unsafe for me to step more fully into my own power? And so I find there's often some of the work around being willing to examine our own narratives and beliefs, and um, like the actions we are or aren't taking in our lives. Like there's a reflective piece. And I guess I also do value the critical sociological piece of like, there are real constraints and there are patterns of inequities and, conditions in our lives. So how do we get brave enough to be willing to kind of work with all of it?
Yeah, to tackle it.
Yeah.
So
But
how
it's
did you?
also super inspiring. That's how.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What does it actually look like? What does it take? So say someone's like
Hmm.
hitting the midlife
Hmm.
threshold and they're like,
Hmm.
"Oh my god, I've lost myself," or maybe I never landed fully and I want to.
Yeah.
Like what do they do? Are do you see like it
Hmm.
seems like people go through these same phases when they're doing that transition?
I mean, I'm sure there's variability, but when you ask that, I guess what I think is almost like, and I don't work in a cookie cutter,
Hmm.
or a programmed way. I work in a very individualized way, but I would say it's almost like step one. And I'm curious if you resonate with this. Step one is when someone decides to invest in themselves and invest in a journey of coaching, it's almost like step one is they've given themselves the gift of a container. Like it's a holding space, I find.
Hmm.
And especially if they tend to feel a bit crowded out in their own lives, I guess I would say don't underestimate the power of a space that's just for you
Yeah.
to be encouraged, to be listened to tap into your own inner wisdom, to actually have breathing space in your own life, to carve out like thinking space and um, dreaming space, imaginative space. Like it may sound a little simple, but I actually think that itself is profound.
Yeah. Yeah. The image I get is like just someone to hold the door closed for you so that you can, so you could have the time and space. And who's saying, like, what did you find in there?
Yes,
I'm interested in what's happening for you.
yes.
Yeah.
And, sometimes people have said to me, like, oh, coaching is almost like making a date with myself. You know,
Yeah.
again, it's like protecting the space because I think otherwise it's easy for weeks to fly by,
Oh,
months
yeah.
to fly by, and kind of the inertia and
Hmm.
momentum and intensity of our lives. So I think it's no small thing to carve out that kind of protective space.
Yeah. So it's make the space, do some
Yeah.
exploration.
Hmm. Then, and I mean, I'm happy for you to chime in with, your added observations, but I would say with that attention to oneself and the encouragement to stay with oneself, I think there's a real organic emergence of new clarity about both what I said earlier, like where are there breaks in our lives? Like what's holding us back or what's getting in our way from more fully claiming
Mm-hmm.
what we want or creating new realities, stepping into more power. So I find there's often greater literacy and awareness both about stuck places or like break systems. And with that awareness comes the possibility to disrupt some of those limiting patterns or create new choice. And then equally, there's this energy, and I think that's one of the joys of coaching is this work of like seeing new strengths, aligning with our values or what matters most to us. Like there's more conscious choice about what it is we want to create. And I find sometimes there's like new clarity, new trajectories, new decisions. And other times it's a much more emergent action oriented process where it's like, okay, dare to run this experiment. Let's do a
Mm-hmm.
little research here. Let's gather data here. And so sometimes it's much more of a discovery through doing rather than some, one great light bulb moment. But yeah, there's something about paying attention, tending to what we're discovering that unfolds into, it sort of moves often in an arc from awareness into increasing choice and then action that's
Mm-hmm.
actually changing our lives or opening up new space.
Yeah. And something coming to mind, like when you're talking about this, is oftentimes when we get to those places, there's so much that's just the habitual holding of awkward life versus, oh, I could do like, oh, now that I see so clearly that I'm just in the habit of doing that thing that makes me so uncomfortable, I can make this shift with some pretty substantial ease, which is always
Mhm.
my favorite part of just that recognition of like, oh, oh, is that all that was? It's just a habit. There's no big, hairy, wrong thing or no big thing that has to be worked out over months and months. But some of these things just are these awareness is all you need, pretty much.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess on the flip side, I would also add, so sometimes it's like, ooh, there's greater ease or possibility than I imagined for myself. But equally, and I say this in a respectful way, sometimes it's also women realize, oh, no wonder this has been so hard. There's this challenge that's sort of been hiding under the hood. Or if I
Yeah.
dare to step into new power in, let's say, my relationship or in with my boss, well, guess what? As you and I both know, Caryn, sometimes there's going to be pushback. People don't always like the changes we want to make, and they're not obliged to actually. And so I
Hmm.
think coaching can also be so helpful so that if it gets tougher than we hoped, or if the fantasy that we had kind of collides with a more challenging reality, then I think it can be even more invaluable that we have someone who believes in us, validates us, can be a thought partner as we strategize. Like, I just want to honor. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
also really damn hard.
Yes. Yes. Both are true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But either way, it matters. It
Yeah.
matters, I think, that we dare to like trust our instincts, kind of feel a sense of alignment for our own North Star, which can,
Hmm.
is different for each person. But like, again, I think sometimes when the going gets tough is when it even makes that extra difference that we've invested in someone to believe in us, hold faith in us, like when we hit some wobble phases that may happen.
Hmm.
But even more
Yeah.
important than that, we don't let that contract us back to the old familiar. I think it matters of how do we help stay the course and trust ourselves and build trust in ourselves as we go.
Yeah. So building power starts with holding space.
I think it often does.
Hmm. Yeah. That tracks for me too.
The other little sort of like thing that's crossing my mind is, I guess, I think it's an interesting moment in our sort of historic era. Like, just to name, why might there be a lot of women kind of awakening to new levels of their power? Like, I guess what I just want to say is, I think it's a sort of challenging, precarious time. And I mean, even just to name it, we're talking on the day of
Yeah.
a crucial, maybe pivotal, American election. And I guess
Hmm.
I just want to add, I think a lot of women really care about our world and care about
Yeah.
our communities and our families and our descendants. And so I think there's a lot of women who also feel like this is bigger than just their own fulfillment or their
Yeah.
own kind of little lives. I think often women care about the impact that they make. And I guess I just would name, I think a lot of us are attuned to the zeitgeist and are attuned to precarity and even existential threat. So I'm not trying to, add drama here, but I think a lot of women feel like I don't want to waste the time that I
Hmm.
have. And what's a bigger sense of purpose for me? Like, a lot of women I work with care about the contribution they're
Yeah.
making. And so those kinds of questions fuel these journeys as well, I find.
Yeah. And we have the data for that, right? When women are
Mhm.
resourced, communities do better.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's start with you so that you can do the greater work.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I just want to name that because I think it's almost like sometimes when women come to me, it's like this isn't just about me. And again, in some ways, it's almost like, where do I need to make sure I'm keeping my own oxygen mask on so that I can, make the difference I'm here to make or I want to make. Sometimes that even adds, what's the word? Like, I think for some women that galvanizes them. Like, to know that it's bigger than
Mm-hmm.
me even adds that almost fuel of like, this
Yeah.
is worth the courage it takes. This is
Right.
worth the risks I'm going to be in relationship with. So
Hmm.
when it's bigger than ourselves, that's all. And again, it doesn't always have to feel grandiose. We don't need a bigger mission. Just the value of our own lives matters and the development of our gifts. Like, I don't want to say we all have to be here with a capital M mission, but a lot of women I know, they are awake to that. They are paying
Hmm.
attention to their lives in a bigger context, which makes it
Hmm.
even more frustrating, I think, to circle back to where we began, if they feel overly constrained or like there's almost this sense of like, I'm here for more. I want
Yeah.
more, you know?
Does anybody know what I'm trying to do here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And it's true. Okay. So what do we need to say that hasn't been said yet about women in power in this midlife time?
Hmm. And I think we've touched, must feel like we've turned a little kaleidoscope around and,
Yeah.
gotten a lot of different little angles. But I guess I just want to add that voice of encouragement to say, um, I think it's worth being brave, and I think it's enriching to dare to
Hmm.
step more fully into our power. And I also think, like, I guess there's something about almost like normalized that there may be different ways that that feels frightening, actually, to step into
Hmm.
power, especially if it's in new ways or ways that our culture hasn't valued for women to do, or any marginalized group for that matter. I think there are
Hmm.
often some parallels. I guess I just want to say, of course, it makes sense that it can feel scary in ways that we might understand, and even in some ways that may feel disproportionate. But there may be some long millennia, frankly, Caryn, millennia of conditioning that would
Hmm.
make it understandable that it can feel threatening to step into our power. But I just want to sort of to say again, like, each one of us, our lives matters. Each one of our lives, I really believe it ripples. And so, yeah, I guess I just want to add that voice of encouragement once more
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
um, I just think it's so special to like feel expansion in our own lives. And I truly believe that kind of all those different, um, I almost want to say like those quotes or those cliches of like, as we dare to rise, like we bring others with us, or like, you know, as we step into our power, that will ripple and inspire in ways that we may not even fully comprehend. So I'm just
Yeah.
kind of wanting to give a cheer, like, do
Yeah.
it in tiny steps with a coach or in other ways. But we all deserve support to more fully claim and remember our power and the fullness of the lives we're here to live.
Hmm. And what I hear you say when you say it's worth being brave is that it's worth feeling uncomfortable. Like, I think we get really good at not having to use bravery and not needing it. And it's such a nice thing to not need bravery in our daily life.
Yes.
But this is such a worthwhile place to put your bravery, even though it feels so unfamiliar sometimes and so uncomfortable. It doesn't mean you're doing
Yes.
it wrong.
No. Can I add one quote? And I
Hmm.
know we're nearing our time, but one of my mentors is Martha Beck, who I trust, Martha.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And okay. And she has a quote. I don't know if I heard it her verbally or in one of her books. And the quote is, pardon me, our familiar hell can be more comfortable than our unfamiliar heaven. And so I think for a lot of women, really stepping into the fullest expression of our power, our own agency, can be that kind of discomfort.
Yeah.
It's the unknown heaven of new frontiers. And to me,
Hmm.
yeah, learning to distinguish the kind of stuck, contracted, but familiar
Yeah.
discomfort versus that growth edge discomfort. I'm right there with you. I don't know,
Yeah.
I just thought of that quote. And
Hmm. That's a good one.
yeah. So
Martha's on it.
yes. Yeah, I guess I could
Yeah.
just want to say it sounds to me like we both feel privileged to do our own work, to accompany women, in some of the various guises of what this can look like. Like you and I probably both know, like for one woman it's in finances, for another
Hmm.
it's, career, and another it's setting boundaries with their
Yeah.
children. I mean, it looks so different,
Yeah.
but it is just, yeah, it matters.
Yeah. Right. And that's why we can't, as women, judge what other women's power looks or feels like, or what ours looks like next to our friends. Like, make room for individual, different kinds of power.
I love that. And we didn't even get into what are the prescripted, valued
Mm,
forms of power and what may be undernamed forms of power. So, yeah, I
yeah.
really like that. Let's
Yeah.
allow that honoring for each one of us in our own lives.
Okay. So if you're listening, I want you to share your answer with yourself or who's ever in the car with you. And maybe Nicola and I can each share, but what's something that maybe isn't normally perceived as being powerful that makes you feel powerful?
I love that question for the listener.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an answer? I'll see if I have an answer.
Sure, we could
Yeah.
each do one, offer
Yeah.
one as well. Okay.
Oh, I've got mine.
And I think I have mine too. Do you want me to go or
Yeah. You go
you?
first.
Okay. And I might, take more time. I'm sure there's lots of little
There's
gems
lots of them.
that
Yes.
that question could evoke. But I guess what comes to mind as maybe a less culturally dominant or almost like a masculine model of power, I would say my empathy and my sensitivity and emotional intelligence are
Mm-hmm.
forms of power that may at times be undervalued or underrecognized that again I could step into, like how can I even in a way kind of leverage that and value that.
Yeah.
That's what popped to my mind. How about you?
Yeah. I mean, it's great that you use those in your work so much. So you get to feel
Yes,
powerful at work. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. How about you?
Mine is I don't know, maybe it seems normal, but I can go into a kitchen and just see what's around and I can make a meal no matter what. And I always feel like a total badass. I'm like, it doesn't matter what's there. I'll find something and I will make this work and it will be relatively good.
I think that is an awesome superpower.
It's a good skill.
I'm inspired. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Okay.
great.
And I wish we were
Okay.
riding along or walking along with you and could hear your answers. Feel free to DM me on Instagram and tell me. I'll share them with Nicola. Um,
Please.
because we all have access to the feeling of power
Hmm.
consistently, and we
Hmm.
can alter how we get to feel it with how we think and how we act. But I think opening up the conversation inside all of ourselves about where we have it, where we want it, what fuels it, what drives it, I think is really
Hmm.
interesting.
I love that, Karin. And the one other little addition I would add as we wrap is who encourages it and who
Good one.
doesn't, like just adding that
Yeah.
extra attention and radar of awareness. And where can
Mhm.
we lean in to our power being valued, recognized, and encouraged?
Love it. Yeah. Okay. So, where can people find you and your power?
Well, on the professional front, people can always go to my website. That's www.nicolaholmes.ca. I think you were going to put it in your
Yeah.
show notes.
Hmm.
And listen, let me be honest. I don't feel like I'm some like crazy social media, like that's the best place, but I enjoy being on Instagram and I definitely still, pop up there. And so that's at Nicola Holmes Coach. I'm
Cool.
on Instagram. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for being here, for sharing your power with us, and for helping us kind of peek through the curtains more of what power might look like for us and to
Mhm.
lean into it because I think you're right. The time is now,
Yeah.
and why not? And for the good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Using our power for good. Karin,
Yeah.
thank you very much for this conversation and this time
Yeah.
together.
Thank you. I appreciate you.